Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us. Well, hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security, our official second episode. We're going to kind of continue with the theme of the previous two, which is just to kind of introduce ourselves, introduce the podcast and all that jazz. But of course, as always, I am here with my co-host Milou. Milou, welcome back.
Hi.
Always good time that we have together, so hopefully everyone else will enjoy our conversation as well.
We just like to hang out and talk about security, so I figure might as well start recording.
Sometimes complain about adulting, that kind of thing, but we'll see if we get there or not. But yeah, so today's episode is really just to for me to do to Milou what she did to me on the last episode, which is really just to interview, for all of your sakes, who you're listening to here. Like, we wanted to make sure that everybody kind of knows who we are and where we come from and our perspective on things, because everybody comes with a perspective, and we feel strongly that understanding a podcast host perspective is important to understanding what they talk about, why they talk about what they talk about, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, as kind of a getting this podcast up and launched, that's what we want to do with this episode.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to shed a little bit of light about my background and kind of why we're here and why this idea of socializing security in this podcast is so important to Brian and I. We just honestly, I think we realized that we both have so many thoughts about the space and also just want to have fun with it. And again, we've already talked about, of just that stigma and kind of that concern related to the word security and it sounding scary and just not approachable. We're just hoping that we can just shed a light to the fact that no, cybersecurity, compliance and data privacy professionals and IT professionals, security, there's so many words for all of these things, but all of these people that work in technology and also in other industries, we all have a shared common thing that we are actively dealing with different threats every single day, but there's such real problems. This morning I spent an hour and a half setting up a new printer. Really frustrating. My hands are covered in ink. Versus, and then stuff happens at work on a regular basis where we're just confronted with these things. And so I'm still really excited about this project that we're doing, and I'm excited about it and ready to just talk more about security.
Yep. We want to make it approachable. Security is everybody's challenge. Everybody's challenged with it at home, at work, everywhere they go, and so trying to make it more approachable and understandable by everybody. So, Milou, why don't we start by having you kind of give us a little bit of your background and what kind of spurred you into this industry and that kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. So I am an attorney by training and a compliance professional by luck and happenstance. And I hate that because when I went to law school, I actually found out really early that I wanted to be a compliance professional, which was not a recommended course of action at the time. I had a lot of people tell me hey, it's just not a traditional path and you're not going to be successful and it's probably not worth your time. And I was lucky enough that I started compliance at a large defense contractor, got to go global for them and ended up suddenly researching data privacy laws for a very large financial institution and then in Europe and Amsterdam for a manufacturing company. And I was still in law school and was learning and was oh, this is what I want to do. And so I was lucky enough that my law school just started a corporate compliance course and fell into it that way. And, did a bunch of stuff at this school. I was I say now I'm a really big compliance nerd. I was then as well. We had our first compliance symposium because I was trying to basically prove some of those people wrong and be no, this is a legitimate path that even people with legal degrees should pursue because they can be successful. I didn't get a job in compliance when I graduated. And so I went on this journey following that of interviewing a bunch of different professionals, spoke to some really, really high level chief compliance officers and was hey, how did you get your job? And most of them consistently was just I just fell into it. Truly every single one was like, oh, I was like in-house counsel, and then, you know, somebody was like, oh, we need a policy, or like we need to build a compliance program, and it just kind of ended up on my desk. And unfortunately, that's how compliance has started for most organizations, where suddenly there's a major regulatory change, and then somebody within the business, maybe on the finance side, legal, operations, honestly, like HR, I've seen it everywhere. Like it could be even IT, right? Like very often IT organizations are the first ones that start with information security audits, because it just starts to be the logical fit first. And so again, I was trying to figure it out. I was consulting at the time and then got a break. And I basically like had an interview for a cloud hosting company. And luckily, the hiring manager kind of saw that I was really into this and kind of took a chance on me. And I'll never forget that, like, I had my first interview, and then they were like, we think you should be here. And so, like, we're going to help you strategize, like, how to pass the next interviews. And so
Awesome.
seriously, it was like the most, like, I seriously had somebody like take a huge chance. And this individual kind of coached me through the process to be able to like talk the talk, to make sure that like some of these really specific information security audits that I was going to be doing, that I like knew what they were, even though like I think they thought like, oh, she could probably research and learn quickly. But like I had no clue what a SOC 2 audit was. I had no idea what ISO 27001 was. These were just things that like I hadn't even seen them in my day-to-day yet, because I had been doing like data privacy compliance and not information security. And so just from there, right, like it was just kind of scary, but somebody just truly took a chance. So like I hate to say that it kind of happened to me too, that like I kind of fell into it. I at least knew like I wanted to do the compliance work. I just never expected I was going to go into information security, cybersecurity, and like IT.
Yeah.
Because it just felt like kind of a like scary barrier to entry. I was like, man, I'm not technical at all. Like I'm really good at understanding really dense regulations and translating them into actionable things. Like I had done this for a defense contractor for like human trafficking laws and like slave labor laws, and then like Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and all those types of things. And then suddenly I was, within my first 3 months, I was managing a SOC 2 audit by myself. And like, accidentally, due to like travel issues, like my boss wasn't able to make it. And so suddenly I was like managing a SOC 2 audit by myself for like a global cloud hosting company. And that was really scary. But like, I was like, oh, I love this. I managed to go to a data center the first time and was like, oh, this is wild. Like, this is where the internet lives. Like, I didn't know this stuff. And so suddenly I kind of was able to like make my way, ended up building a very large compliance program for that cloud hosting company. This is, you know, kind of where Brian and I's paths started to cross, and, you know, was able to start doing global audits and build out a team, and see things across the world that I'm like still super grateful for. That flirting that line between like trespass and vendor audits is like a really small line. And I just had some crazy things that happened, especially like because I don't look and fit necessarily the like traditional path of somebody in InfoSec. Like, you know, I'm sure we'll get into it when we talk about future episodes, but like most of the people that were touring me around these data centers weren't anticipating it was going to be like 3 young women that walked into the room.
Yeah.
And so we ended up like, you know, I've had crazy things happen. Like security guards have opened doors for me, and like truly when I was trying to test whether or not they were going to let me walk out with a server with customer data on it, like that was where I was testing them. And then literally they would be like, oh my gosh, here, like and like, yeah, that's kind of what happens when you like look like this, I guess. It's just like, they weren't intentionally doing anything wrong, but like they weren't anticipating that I was like testing their security controls and then like going to be like talking to like their boss's boss about this, you know, like that's just kind of the nature of the thing. I've done like SaaS, IaaS, and platform as a service across the spectrum. So I think Brian and I can definitely talk about different types of like cloud service models and the information security and compliance requirements like across these global standards that we're used to seeing these days. And now like I'm starting a whole new venture where I'm going out on my own and like trying to do that full time and really trying to like build out a consulting practice so that I can not only do compliance consulting and also do legal work as an attorney under 2 different types of entities for clients around the world.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I mean, one of the things I love about successful people like us, and it sounds a little conceited to say it that way, but I feel like we've both been successful in our careers, is that we do stumble into interesting places that we find niches. Once we find those niches and realize we have a passion in those niches, we jump full in, and that makes a huge difference. So several things I wanted to poke at that you mentioned. You talked about going to school and compliance not being a defined path, and that factoid kind of blew me away, because it's I mean, it's not like we in information security think that compliance is a relatively new thing. They finally care about IT, and now they're starting to put compliance on it. But compliance has existed in the automotive industry and the mining industry and in the oil and gas industry. Like, all these industries have been regulated for forever, and it kind of blows me away that that's not a defined path in law school. Like, I would think that, like you said, you came out fairly early and had chief compliance officers to talk to, so clearly there was a top level path to go to. So can you maybe speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I found it really frustrating at the time, and that was why I was kind of like trying to prove them wrong a little bit about being like, I disagree. The problem is like in a law school format, right? They're so used to the majority, right, is like going to go sit for the bar exam and is then going to go pursue traditional law. And most likely, like previously, right, you would graduate law school, maybe a law firm would pay for your law school. That was not the situation for me, and I think that hasn't been the case for a very long time. But if we're thinking like 30, 40 years ago, that was very normal, that like you would have an employer potentially pay for you to go to law school, or like a law firm basically would be like, you're an associate and we're going to pay for your law school. Mm-hmm. That is now not the standard at all. It's really, really rare. So you would go to law school, you would pay for it, and then you would hope that you got placement at like a really, really big law firm. But if you weren't at like a super top percentage law school, and then also weren't, top 5, top 10% of your class, then, you probably weren't going to get a big seat at a major law firm. Is just unlikely. They're so competitive. And so then they start to being like, okay, like maybe you want to do like small law firms or medium sized, or like a non-traditional legal path. And coincidentally, I spoke to my law school the other day about this to just like check in with what they're calling it. And they're literally still calling it like non-traditional path, which nice. That just sounds bad to me. Like, it just doesn't, like, it's like, no, like, I'm a cybersecurity and data privacy attorney. Like, that is not like an insignificant thing. No. And like, I have worked hard to be that, but like also like there's stuff that you're like, okay, I went a non-traditional path. I still do some legal work. Most of my work is really like compliance and privacy work, which is consulting and not truly like legal work. And we're going to have disclaimers in the podcast that will explain what the differences are for those things. I am not your attorney, and I'm not representing myself on this podcast as an attorney, but I do happen to have a legal degree. And, so they're like, oh, non-traditional paths. And you're like, yeah, but like, I'm an expert in my field now, and I've been able to do that in a short amount of time because of the opportunities that presented themselves to me, and I was also able to like chase those. So I think it's gotten better in the law school space, but it's still like, they're not focusing on cybersecurity compliance. They're not focusing, I think it's more still like general corporate compliance, which is great because it's applicable across industries. If you know how to build a compliance program for like healthcare versus finance versus, like for like fintech, or then if you are going into automotive and stuff like that, like manufacturing is so regulated. So like that is still really helpful, but like seeing niches, I believe technology courses are getting better with law schools, but it's not like how to do a SOC 2 audit or like how to build a GDPR compliance program, which like I kind of think is the most useful, because like most companies across the world, the second that they have EU data subjects or like accidentally are processing a European email address, like suddenly that applies, right? And so, or theoretically could, I'm not, not saying what you're supposed to be doing with your GDPR instance, but it's so applicable right now, and they're still like really behind.
On the IT side of things, it's not all that much different. Like, information security programs in traditional four-year colleges are relatively new at this point. fact, I was just having a conversation with a friend earlier today that we were talking about there's not really a well-defined path to be a sysadmin in college. And that does tend to be a career a lot of people fall into. I know people that were chemists and people that were physicists and people that were, Navy and Air Force that end up being sysadmins. And, I'm a former programmer, ended up as a sysadmin. So
I think it's that like shared theme of like, I didn't think I was going to be an IT professional, but I kind of fell into the space. And I hate that because it's so like, it's such a barrier to entry. So like, again, like I was super frustrated when I was talking to like chief compliance officers at very, very large, like Fortune 100 companies, because like as a student, they would they will talk to you if you're a student. Like this is always my biggest advice for students, to just like reach out via LinkedIn or like via email and just like introduce yourself and basically say something like, wow, you have my dream job. Like, how did you get there? Yeah. It worked really well for me. And that being said, I still work with my law school very actively. They have a compliance course and I speak to them at least once a year to like talk to them about what it's like to get a job in compliance, and now I am actually starting to work with their career office because I didn't have like a stellar experience, because like I was kind of turned off when they were like, oh, we have no compliance internships and it's a non-traditional path and you're not going to make a lot of money. And it's like, that's just not true. It's just not true. Yeah. So it's not true.
It can be done.
Yeah, it can.
Another parallel that I want to pull on that I loved hearing, and you just touched on it, is the mentorship piece of things. Being able to find people that have the job that you want, that have had the career and can help guide you through that. People that, even during the interview process, you talked about having somebody identify, you are the person we need. Let me do everything I can to help get you on board, and then usher you through what you need to get through in order to be the person that A, we need, and B, you can be. And of course, with women in tech, that's always a big thing too. Like, you need to demonstrate that women can be successful in this career field so that it attracts more females, that it attracts more, non-gender conforming type of people. They need to see themselves in those spaces. So maybe talk a little bit about that, if you can, a little bit deeper.
Yeah, for sure. So the mentorship piece really is, I think, like, I'm very bold by nature. It's just like who I am. I think it's very disarming to a lot of people. I am Dutch by background. I believe this is part of my heritage. I don't think that I'm, Dutch people are known for being quite direct. And I am, was born in the US, but I'm fluent, like, Dutch was my first language. I'm still fluent today. Grew up in what I think is called like as a third culture kid. So American, but not totally American. I'm European. And then like, if I go to Europe, I'm American, vice versa. Yeah. What I will say is, because of my like bold attitude, I think I've been able to get quite far in my career because I'm not scared of asking for help. And I'm also just not scared of like introducing myself, trying to get some really, really great speakers lined up for this podcast. And I have just no fear with this. Like, I'm not concerned about reaching out to CEOs of companies that I just like think are a huge deal in our space. And like, we can't really offer that much right now, but like, I would love to just chat with them. And like, like seriously, past week, I was talking to like a senior advisor at the White House just because I like kind of thought to ask. And they said yes. And it was like, and so like, I'm always like with students that I work with or like compliance professionals that reach out. If they ever reach out, I absolutely try to just like meet with them, because like they did exactly what I've been telling them to do. Like, if they heard that through articles I've written or like through introductions at schools, if they reach out, I like pretty much always try my best to like either like send them resources or meet with them, kind of depending on what they need. And so I've always just found that to be really successful. But yeah, I think the reason I do well in my space is because I am that way. Because I sometimes, actually, honestly, most of the time, I am the only woman in the room. On a virtual, like in a virtual meeting, in person, whatever, I'm usually in the minority. And I'm very frequently also like sufficiently in the minority of like somebody who has like a larger like title on the hierarchy. Like, I might like be younger or look younger, but like I'm technically one of the most senior people in the room, but I'm a female and I'm probably a lot younger than most of them. And so I think I've been successful in this space because I'm not scared to just like speak up. And I've been put in positions of power where I have backing from the highest level of the organizations that I work with. So like, and I'm also not scared to use that authority, right? Like if somebody is doing something wrong, a compliance officer basically has to be able to go to the highest level and report it and feel like it's heard. Otherwise, it's not a good match, right? Like that's not an independent compliance program. And so like as a woman, I can see though that like certain things I'm like, I don't know, like if somebody is maybe like more shy or doesn't feel as comfortable like speaking up, especially in a room with like 10 other older men that are not maybe taking them seriously. I get why there's not a lot of us here because it's really frustrating.
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
I generally have to like show that I know what I'm talking about before most people will take me seriously.
Yeah. And you know, I obviously don't. I'm on the right side of the skin tone and gender side of things, but my career went fast when I was young, and so I did have to deal with oftentimes being the senior person on the team, but still being the youngest person on the team at the same time. So, not to equate all that because you know there's multiple layers when it comes to not fitting in and having to break stereotypes and having to stand up in scary situations. I agree. It is important to be bold. Obviously, there's a weird balance there that you don't want to be off-putting to people.
No.
But you do have to prove yourself. Like you have to hit the target more often than not, and more often than you know the stereotypical people that are in the room. So you know, kudos for that. Obviously, we know each other well enough. I could say that you've earned it more than not. It sucks to hear that it has to be such an uphill battle, though, and you know that's one of the reasons I'm excited to do the podcast with you is to be able to bring in those kinds of experiences to the conversations we have with people, and to be able to bring in those people that can speak to that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, part of this podcast and this idea with socializing security is you and I are both truly experts in our field. We are very lucky that you and I both have like a very large breadth of knowledge and experience, but that does not mean we are the only people that we want to hear from, just because like we are constantly learning. I learn something new in my job every single day, whether that's truly every day. Like I can't think of a day that I was like, this was the same as yesterday. Like I love that about my job. It's constantly changing and I'm always forced to like learn something new or pick up a new skill. But like for a lot of people that's tricky and hard and I love it. I think that's part of the reason why I love being in cybersecurity and IT and InfoSec and privacy, because it's constantly changing. But like I have so much to learn. I might be an expert in certain things, but that does not mean that I am like truly comfortable that I'm like, I don't need to learn anything else.
Yeah. For me, when I stop learning on a regular basis, I get frustrated and bored, and that's when I start looking for the next role, the next job. And you know,
which is probably like a good tip. This is probably like
I mean, and it's not for everybody. I know people that are perfectly happy doing the same job, not having to really learn much year in and year out for decades. And that's fine. If that makes you happy and you just want to go, you know, push that button every day for 50 years and then retire, good on you. I'm not here to judge that one way or the other. For me, it's about being, I get entertained by learning. And so, yeah, this podcast and the ability to learn well outside of my comfort zone, in a unfortunately very public format, by design is an interesting way to learn, and is a way that I enjoy learning.
I mean, I think if we're like open about it and honest about it and being like, hey, like I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be. I don't like, I truly like, I might say something that I'm like, shoot, I didn't mean that. Or like, I need to learn from that. And I hope that this can be like a collaborative and relatively safe space where we can bring people on. And like, truly also, if we disagree with them, then we can safely do that. This is meant to be like kind of fun, honestly. Like sometimes like this stuff feels like so much work and I just want it to be like a fun space, you know, like in my professional life, I generally gravitate towards startups because like I do crazy stuff at work. Like truly, I have a walkout song for certain like company presentations, like because sometimes I'm like, hi, we've had a security incident and like, hey, there's a data breach. Like that's not like fun energy. Like as much as like it's very important and serious, it's like that doesn't like bring me a ton of joy all the time. Or like if somebody like clicked a link, like I'm glad they reported it, but like they probably feel really, really bad about it. So like, how do you make sure that like you're building a culture of compliance around security that feels approachable? And I think we're trying to do the same thing here.
Yep, absolutely. So before we jet out of here, you and I have talked a lot about the topics we want to cover. So maybe share with everybody kind of some of the topics you're most excited for us to dive into here.
Yeah, so I mean, I love compliance. So some of the, when I say compliance, though, that means like honestly anything these days. Like I can make a case for compliance, like pretty much like even something as simple as like, did you like update your phone? It starts to touch the things that we do every day. So I'm really excited about some of our upcoming conversations related to like responsible usage of AI. It's a topic area that I'm investing a lot of my time and resources in, not only just like learning how to use generative AI technologies, but also how to secure them and how to protect the data that's inside them. There are some privacy topics that we've been talking about and thinking through related to like children's privacy and like online sexual abuse materials. There's a lot of traction right now in the news, and so it's like very of mind. And then also just like getting individuals, companies to like come talk to us about the things that they're like working on and like that we can learn with them, I think is awesome. Like there's certain tooling that I use every day that I'm like, wow, I should share this and I want to be able to share that. And so, you know, I think I'm excited to start introducing some of those technologies so that we can learn from each other, because sometimes I really crowdsource this. Like if I'm looking for like a, hey, what's a good social media like managing tool that like helps me do that, I like want people to recommend things, because those are usually the best tips, is this like word of mouth kind of community. So in general, I'm just really hopeful that like this project, and I say project because I think it's not just a podcast for me, it's really like I've been calling this my passion project, but it's worth it because I think it's just like could create wonderful community for the two of us and our larger crowd. And so like I'm really excited about that. So yeah, honestly, like whatever we talk about, I'm pretty stoked.
Excited for the conversations. Not necessarily any specific topics is a good summary for me as well.
Yeah, it's just like, I mean, I really could talk about like anything. I mean, security is truly everywhere. Like every time you and I get on and we're like doing some of our just like workshopping sessions, like this morning, you know, I'm actively showing somebody, like I'm working with the tech support, showing my password, and they're like, oh, can you like please type in your like Wi-Fi password? And you're like, oh, hold on, let me move my like thing. And I told you last week, I think I accidentally like exposed my voice password like with a third party. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be doing better. Like I just fell for this, basically. It was not a malicious actor, but it could have been.
For sure. Yeah, and I've been doing some stuff that you get an email that says, hey, you need to call this number and deal with something. And I'm like, is this legit? So I have to go research the phone number, make sure the phone number is legit, and make sure the person I'm talking to is legit. And I know the question's going to be asked, okay, give me the last 4 of your social security number. And I'm like, I don't want to answer that question, but if this thing is legit, then I know I need to, but the world is so hard to navigate.
It's so hard. And it's honestly, sometimes I think because I work in this, it takes me longer to do things because I'm now like so concerned something is going to go wrong, that like that's not good for the brand. Like that's not good for me as an individual and also as a professional. Like it's not great if I'm like, oh shoot, I fell for something. But like it took me 45 minutes to pay my property taxes the other day because I almost had like debilitating fear that I was sending money to the wrong place.
Yep.
And there was not sufficient compliance documentation. So like there wasn't specifically like, you should be using this link. And they were like going to like a third party who like didn't seem legitimate, like didn't have a logo, like did not fit my due diligence at all. Like if I were doing due diligence from them as like a vendor, like as a purchaser of this product, I would have been like, no, like this seems fishy.
Yeah.
But like couldn't get anyone on the phone, couldn't confirm. So like, we'll see. We'll see. Wow. I took screenshots, but like that's my personal money that could just be out, and it's not an insignificant amount of money, and it took me like way longer than it should have.
That, I believe, is yet another topic to add to our list. So, awesome, Milou. It was great getting to know you a lot better. Hopefully, everyone else kind of enjoyed getting to know us a little bit better. We'll be next week starting in on actual topics, so looking forward to actually really digging in and giving people some real insight into things. So thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And again, we're focused on community here at Socializing Security. So far you can follow us on LinkedIn at Socializing Security. And if you have questions or comments or suggestions, send them to info@socializingsecurity.com while we continue to build out more of our systems.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.